I saw what I saw, and I can't take that out of my mind.
December 1980. The airspace of a U.S. military base is invaded by UFOs over several nights.
I was thinking at the time, is this a warning? Is this an attempt to communicate?
Among the dozens of witnesses, high-ranking Air Force officers.
These are military people trained to observe.
Once sworn to secrecy, they're now ready to talk.
I walked around it. I felt it.
Almost immediately, critical evidence disappears. A cover-up begins amid claims of brainwashing and intimidation.
They said bullets are cheap.
But the cover-up can't stop civilians from coming forward to corroborate the sighting.
It was gone. It was just incredible, wasn't it?
A top-secret memo confirming the events unleashes a firestorm.
This was an official United States Air Force document talking about a structured metallic craft.
And amazingly, part of the encounter is captured on audio tape.
There's no doubt about it. This is weird.
New witnesses go on the record for the first time.
It was like a pulsating eye.
The truth about what happened in Rendlesham Forest.
The Rendlesham Forest incident is bigger than Roswell.
Could well change what you believe about UFOs.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
This may be the most shocking story you've never heard. In December of 1980, UFOs allegedly invaded the airspace of 2 U.S. air bases in England. Even more shocking, airmen stationed there observed the events, but were powerless to do anything about them. The Rendlesham Forest case is one with explosive implications. Uncovering the truth of what really happened there could finally reveal why UFOs are one of the most closely guarded secrets of the modern age.
I have gone on record as saying that Rendlesham might be some sort of turning point in history, I think, but it may be that if any one case leads to an explanation for the UFO phenomenon, this case might be it.
The government have the idea that if they disclose the fact that there are physical objects with maximum performance which we can't match, people would get in a panic.
I think our government owes the men who were involved in this. They owe them not just an explanation, but some compensation for what they suffered.
This was a cover-up, you know? Why was this a cover-up? So for the first time, we're starting to get somewhere.
This could lead to chaos, in my opinion. I think there are very good reasons for the cover-up.
December 2002. Britain's Ministry of Defense releases 180 pages of documents related to the Rendlesham Forest UFO incidents. Included in those pages are claims of extraterrestrial encounters, men in black, brainwashing, and accusations of a government cover-up of epic proportions.
We never talked about it. Once we were debriefed, we never talked about it with anyone.
I was told specifically not to say anything about it. You're not to tell anybody on base. You said you don't tell your wife about it. You don't talk about it around your daughter. You don't talk around about anybody. And that's what I did.
I learned after the fact, secondhand, that there were some pretty intense interrogations, is the best way to put it, of several of the young airmen, at least 3 or 4 of them. And I personally think that 2 of them were affected, and still are to this day, by some of the techniques that were used to extract information or discuss things with them.
And there were a lot of people on this base that violated people's human rights, including mine, where there was mind control attempts for whatever agenda put on people, and this is all in 24 hours to 48 hours after the incident.
But why would any government agency employ such extreme measures to cover up evidence of UFOs?
The problem is, thousands of people have top-secret clearance. When a subject is very sensitive, it needs to be further restricted, further compartmentalized, and that's when you get what calls to above top secret, and the UFO subject falls within that category. and it has since 1947 at least.
In many ways, the Rendlesham Forest UFO encounters of 1980 are eerily similar to events that shook the small town of Roswell, New Mexico, back in July of 1947.
In strictly evidential terms, this case is bigger than Roswell.
Journalist Georgina Bruni spent years interviewing countless Rendlesham eyewitnesses for her book, You Can't Tell the People.
This is a case with so much evidence. It's just amazing. You've got military witnesses here, commanders, colonels. You've got, of course, Colonel Holt's memorandum. You've got his tape recording that he made on the night.
Keep the flashlights off. There's something very, very strange.
And also now we've got the photographs of the landing site. And of course, on top of that, you've got the witness statements from just after the incident. I mean, there is an abundance of evidence here to say that something happened.
The story begins in rural Suffolk, an area known for its dark and mysterious history.
It's one thing to focus on the UFO incident, but I always say to people, look at the background to the area. Possibly this has something to do with that case.
Suffolk, East Anglia, is about 70 miles or so northeast of London. It is an area with a darker and more subdued military test history. Mustard gas and the like were worked out in that area during World War I.
The whole east coast of England in that area for decades was used for military weapons research, radar research, all sorts of strange tales from the Second World War about villages being evacuated because of secret experiments involving death rays and burned bodies found on the beaches and things like this.
Not far from this area, separated by a tiny slice of Rendlesham Forest, lie two key military installations. So close together, they're called the Twin Bases. Bentwaters and Woodbridge served as British installations until 1951, when they were leased to the United States. In 1980, the Twin Bases ranked among the most important U.S. military outposts in the world. More than 1,000 planes and some 4,000 Air Force personnel stood ready to defend or attack as necessary. Reliable reports have recently revealed that the bases even housed tactical nuclear weapons that could be used to thwart potential Soviet aggression. While writing his book on the Rendlesham events, Left at East Gate, author Peter Robbins spent years researching the history of Bentwaters and Woodbridge.
The secret of the bases was that Bentwaters and Woodbridge were the home of a huge amount of nuclear ordnance in violation of our then existing treaty with the United Kingdom.
Colonel Charles Halt and Sergeant Jim Peniston are two of the key witnesses in the Rendlesham case. Even today, the topic of nuclear weapons remains a sensitive subject.
I know you're not at liberty to either confirm or deny the existence of tactical nuclear weapons at the base where you served. Nonetheless, it's widely believed there were as many as 500 tactical nuclear weapons at that base. When you reported what you saw, did you also report that the craft seemed to take a particular interest in any particular area?
I'm not sure I want to comment on that.
I don't know if
I think it's very difficult to comment on.
Now, officially, we didn't have nuclear weapons, but that's what we were trained to do, was secure the ordnance.
The men assigned the duty of keeping Bentwaters Woodbridge and its weaponry secure were Air Force Security Police. These highly trained men made up the core group of witnesses for the Rendlesham incidents.
I think that most of the witnesses that I've interviewed have been very honest because, I've interviewed them over and over again. I mean, they have accused me of interrogating them.
When UFO Invasion at Rendlesham returns, hard physical evidence of the Rendlesham UFO. Two Air Force officers risk their reputations and pensions to solve a UFO case many believe is bigger than Roswell. UFO Invasion at Rendlesham will return. December 1980. Over a 3-night period, numerous U.S. airmen encounter unexplained lights in a metallic craft outside 2 American air bases located in Suffolk, England. Almost immediately, U.S. military officials erect a stony wall of silence around the incidents, igniting claims of a cover-up.
It was clamped down, and it was compartmentalized, and that's how the Air Force works and the military works. What one guy knows, they don't talk about it to other guys. If you're not maintaining your oath and the secrecy, you've broken rank.
The consequences of being a public UFO witness, especially in a military context, has more than a military cost, a social cost. It has a very human cost.
Whether it's Roswell, Kecksburg, or Rendlesham, convincing military witnesses to go on the record has been extremely difficult. The reasons range from national security oaths to fears of ridicule, imprisonment, or worse. But one top man has spoken out, Lord Peter Hill Norton, Britain's former admiral of the fleet. He believes Charles Halt, Jim Penniston, and others encountered an otherworldly craft.
These are military people. They are, by their very definition, experts at spotting military facts. I don't see any reason why any of them should have made up one word of their testimony about what happened.
The outspoken Hill Norton is the highest-ranking military figure in the world to go on the record about the Rendlesham case.
In America, the equivalent would be maybe a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, someone like Colin Powell, actually coming out and stating in public that he believes in UFOs and he believes they may be extraterrestrial. It's that important.
Something actually landed, and I don't think there can be any doubt about that. I would be very surprised indeed if there were not official documents somewhere hidden which will explain that something did land, but would be very surprised indeed if anybody knew what it was.
The only official U.S. document that's been released is the Halt Memo. Written in January of 1981, 2 weeks after the incidents occurred, by then Bentwaters Woodbridge Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. The memo details multiple UFO encounters.
I put together sort of a, how shall I say, cleaned up version of what happened. I called it Unexplained Lights.
Even in its sanitized form, the Halt Memo graphically described extremely unusual phenomena.
Early in the morning, December 27th, saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object described as being metallic in appearance, triangular in shape, 2 to 3 meters across the base. And as the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. Signed, Charles I. Halt, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF, Deputy Base Commander.
I waited several weeks after I made the memo, and nothing seemed to happen, so I put the file away.
While the memo is considered by many to be definitive proof of the bizarre events that befell Halt and numerous other airmen in Rendlesham Forest, it is only the tip of the iceberg. There are many questions still to be answered. What were those unexplained lights? Why did they invade the airspace of 2 bases that house nuclear weapons? And why is the U.S. government trying to cover up what really happened?
Oh, Jim.
For Halt and Penniston, Rendlesham Forest is a crime scene of sorts. Aided by environmental scientist Patrick Davison of Mayer Environmental, they will reconstruct the events of late December 1980. The hope is that the 2 airmen can lead Davison to the exact landing site, where he'll test for residual radiation.
We initially thought that this was an aircraft crash, at least I did. Unfortunately, everything changed about 10 minutes into the investigation, and that's why you're here.
Okay. That's a standard dose meter.
Davison has come to the investigation armed with a state-of-the-art radiation detection system.
We've got a Geiger counter for measuring gamma radiation and also a gamma spectrometer.
If radiation is still present, it could provide evidence that a craft or crafts landed in Rendlesham Forest.
We certainly could have used that the night we were out in the forest.
We got a little bit of a jaunt here. Not too bad.
Jim Penniston's search for answers to this mystery won't be easy. Much has changed in Rendlesham Forest since December of 1980.
The air temperature was 32 degrees. It was clear, crisp night. We drove down this.
Penniston was accompanied by Sergeant John Burroughs and Airman First Class Edward Cabansag. who'd been transferred to Bentwaters only a few days prior.
As we were heading out, I thought this was a prank. I thought, okay, 3-4 days on with my flight, there's a big, huge mud puddle out here, and they're going to throw me in the mud. As we got closer and closer, and I could see the intensity on both the other gentlemen's face, I knew that this was really going to be something more involved than a prank.
The road was pretty hard because everything was frozen. The other problem we were having, and it's inherent of the area, is we were having a dampening effect on the radios, meaning the radio was breaking up.
It's like the closer we would get to it, we would lose communication with Central Security Control.
To this day, Penniston remains certain he handled the situation exactly by the book.
You know, I'm not a military guy, so forgive me. But if I go out in the woods and I see something that is that strange, I don't stand there for 45 minutes and take pictures and notes. I go for reinforcements in a hurry.
Okay, good question. What we did is we each had interbase radios, so I had people set up as relays for the radio. We were in constant contact to a point, so during this 45 minutes, even though I wasn't receiving, didn't really mean a lot to me, but I still went and transmitted. I have to report what's going on. We outside the installation and with the resources around that base, I better be reporting every 5 minutes, or they're going to send somebody else out there. And I did not want anybody out there until I could ascertain what was in front of me.
His flight chief was actually at the back gate, relaying and monitoring this whole thing, and it would have been incumbent upon him to make the decision to up-channel, to call for help, call for 30 and 30, which means a lot of armed troops immediately.
So in other words, yours was standard operating procedure?
He operated within the parameters he should have.
There was some distortion on the perception of time. The time out there seemed to go awful fast. 30, 45 minutes felt like 2 or 3 minutes. At this point in time, I realized it wasn't an aircraft crash. Wasn't getting the smell of fuel burning. Job was identify, get the facts, report the facts, and let somebody else make the assessment. I had my notebook out, and I was taking notes.
Jim Penniston has brought a key piece of evidence back with him to Rendlesham Forest. His original notebook from the night that he encountered an unidentifiable craft.
Description of what was going on was larger white light glowing.
Burroughs would say, do you see that? Do you see what's out there at the edge of the trees? And I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm going, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? And then he extended his finger out, put my head to his end of his finger. Look at the end of my finger. But it was moving left, right, and it had blue, white, yellow lights.
Approximately 10, 15 meters from it, it was quite distinguishable. It was triangular in shape. It was not an aircraft, but it was a craft of some sort.
Everything that I had seen in my technical school, that I was privileged under a secret clearance to see, didn't look anything like that.
Certain things didn't make sense. I couldn't determine the front. That was a problem. Second, it seemed running, but no sound. Third was the aspect of having electricity in the air. I could feel it in my clothing, my hair, my skin. The next one is after I got up close to the craft, the writing changes. It changes from being written confidently to shaky. Gotta stop there. Sorry. I need a little time. Okay. Wow.
When UFO Invasion at Rendlesham returns, Air Force officers meet new witnesses who can confirm their encounters.
It did seem as though it was observing us.
A cover-up begins as a young airman is forced to lie about what he saw.
I was told to sign paperwork stating that there was nothing out of the ordinary.
And a first-hand look at what could be physical proof of the Rendlesham UFO. UFO Invasion at Rendlesham will continue in a moment. The Betwaters incident of 1980 is certainly the best-known UFO sighting in British history. But 24 years earlier, in nearly the exact same location, Royal Air Force fighter pilots encountered an object that defies explanation to this very day. The case, known simply as Lakenheath, is legendary among UFO researchers.
An object was tracked on radar. Jets were scrambled, as has happened on a number of occasions over the years, and the pilots then had a visual sighting of an unknown craft of some sort.
Radar personnel at the Bentwaters Woodbridge Control Tower estimated that the bright light flew by at an astonishing 4,000 miles per hour.
An UFO came in and played these cat and mouse games with British interceptors. And in fact, that case was secret for about 10 years and then was discussed in the Condon Committee report, where it was listed as an unknown.
Like Lakenheath, the Rendlesham Forest sightings of 1980 were also dismissed by the Ministry of Defense. But if, as the MOD claims, the events were of no defense significance, then why were they so interested in radar records from the Bentwaters Control Tower during Christmas week of 1980?
What happened was that one of these radar operators got a call from somebody at Bentwaters to say, do you have anything unusual on your scope? And this officer checked, and for 2 or 3 sweeps of the screen, so just for a few seconds, there was something there, and he said, yes, I do have an uncorrelated target, and it is directly over your base.
What I was told from Sergeant Coffey, the controller, is that he had to check with radar. He's the one that informed me that that night, before I proceeded off base, he says, well, yes, we had contact, and it just dropped out of sight within like 5 or 6 miles of Bentwaters. Some of the difficulty I'm having is I've only been to the site twice. The night it happened, the following morning.
In order for Sergeant Jim Peniston and Colonel Charles Halt to find the site, they must comb 5 square miles of Rendlesham Forest, looking for a site that measures 10 feet by 10 feet. If Peniston and Halt can locate the craft's actual touchdown point, environmental scientist Patrick Davison will test for residual radiation that could offer conclusive proof of the incident.
By the size of the craft, the only way it could have came down is from above.
Airman Edward Cabansag and Sergeant John Burroughs accompanied Peniston into the forest in the early morning hours of December 27, 1980. Cabansag and Burroughs were stationed behind Peniston to maintain clear radio contact with the base. Cabansag recalls the mysterious craft hovering in front of them.
It was maybe 100 yards, 150 yards. Couldn't quite tell if it was silvery, but it was moving left, right. Nothing could move the way it moved at the time. Nothing could move that quick.
Following protocol, Peniston approached the craft, snapping photos and taking notes.
It was probably the most different thing I've ever investigated in my entire life. Anything I could see, I would go ahead and write down. Structure of craft, fabric, black, smooth, glass-like, surface unknown, identity unknown. I paced off the size of the craft, taking notes of the distance. 9 feet long, approximately 7 to 8 feet high. I couldn't tell what was the front or the back. I had trouble when I was walking around the craft to distinguish engines. Propulsion, unknown. No sound, but apparently operating somehow. Type of aircraft, unknown.
Peniston observed the craft from every angle.
I made extra effort to look for the crew compartment or windows or anything like that, or access ports. Could not see any. There was no handles or anything like that. The craft was completely smooth on the outside. Skin fabric of craft, warm. Probably the most startling part of it was the fabric of the craft. Aircraft are metal, and this was maybe metal, but it was very smooth. The fabric seemed like black glass. High electric static on clothes, skin, hair. Identifying markings on left front. That is probably the most compelling thing that said, well, my God, this is from someplace else. Symbols etched or engraved, question mark. Symbols recorded.
Investigation brings Charles Halt and Jim Penniston face to face with civilian eyewitnesses for the first time. Like Jim Penniston, Roy and Marina Webb also encountered a mysterious craft in the early morning hours of December 27, 1980, as they were returning home from a family get-together.
My daughter spotted this shooting star. You know what children are like. Oh, Dad, there's a shooting star. Then she just said, well, that seems very, very odd. It seems to be traveling parallel with us. My husband thought it could have been a jet. But the longer we went, he realized that it obviously wasn't.
The more we carried on, so the light was still there. Then that's why I asked my wife to stop the next lay-by. We pulled in the lay-by.
He wound the window down and showed me where it was. And it was stationary. It did seem as though it was observing us because there was no other traffic on the road. And then it started to travel upwards.
And then that went off at a very fast pace.
Blink of an eye. It was incredible.
The Webbs aren't the only civilian eyewitnesses to corroborate the timeline of events on December 27, 1980.
I'm sort of interested to talk to you, Jerry, after all this.
Woodbridge resident Jerry Harris may have observed the same events as Jim Penniston, but from a different perspective.
I walked across the yard, and I could see the lights over the trees over there. You'd go up in the sky and come back down again and go crossways, very, very, very fast. And they would sort of come to a standstill and hover. And they would move off again. Eventually, two of them sort of went away into the distance. The other one stayed there. It went up in the air and hovered, then came down and went straight down into the trees. And I thought it had crashed.
There was a motion picture camera filming this phenomena.
Somebody from the base was filming this. And no one knows what happened to these films.
Back in Rendlesham Forest, scientist Patrick Davison is doing his best to answer some of those questions. Thus far, he hasn't uncovered any traces of residual radiation. This might be cause for disappointment, were it not for the fact that this scientific search led Penniston and Halt to the discovery of not one, but two landing sites.
I was taken there and told this is the landing site.
Mm-hmm. Your original memo. I mean, I seen that, and I was sure you were talking about the same site.
This is not the site that I went to where I saw something. So obviously, on the different nights, either two different things or the same thing came back.
Oh, when I looked at the plaster cast was the same size as the indentations that I saw, and the distance between them was the same. So something landed twice. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the same thing or not, it was something similar.
Coming up, newly declassified documents shed light on the case.
The most convincing evidence is probably written by civil service personnel.
Did Men in Black investigate the Rendlesham case?
The Men in Black are for real.
New evidence confounds the skeptics.
This site is just a whole new ballgame.
Was the base's nuclear stockpile a target for the UFOs?
Evidently, this object had shined a beam on the weapon.
And never-before-seen footage reveals shocking details of the interrogations.
Where did they give you the shot?
UFO Invasion at Rendlesham will return. Suffolk, England, 1980. When some U.S. Air Force personnel said they spotted UFOs outside the Bentwaters Woodbridge air bases, the incident technically fell under the jurisdiction of Britain's Ministry of Defense. Like the U.S. military, the MOD has never publicly acknowledged the existence of any extraterrestrial craft. But the credibility of the MOD policies is now being tested by a public outcry and the dogged determination of one of Great Britain's highest-ranking military officers.
There are only two conceivable explanations for what we might call the Bentwaters incident. The first is that it happened. Something landed. Patrol was sent out to investigate it. They saw it, they photographed it. One of them even touched it. The other explanation is that nothing of the sort happened, and that Colonel Holt and a couple of his men were hallucinating.
This was quite literally front-page news.
Like so many who witnessed the Rendlesham Forest events, Sergeant Jim Penniston was plagued by nightmares. For the first time ever on television, Jim Penniston has given the exclusive permission to air portions of his hypnotic regression. Could this prove to be the Rendlesham Forest smoking gun?
I really can't believe personally that all this stuff can be true. But the fact of the matter is the regression just about eliminated the nightmares.
Where did they give you the shot?
Among the most disturbing revelations to arise was that an agent or agents injected Penniston with sodium pentothal, more commonly known as truth serum.
Prior to hypnosis, I was not aware of any type of drug-induced methods within the Air Force or anything like that.
He returned to Rendlesham Forest in 2003 with his former deputy base commander, Colonel Charles Halt. Their investigation turned up a dramatic discovery, the existence of a second landing site. Armed with this new revelation, Penniston and Halt take Forester Vince Thurkettle to the second site identified by Penniston. Prior to this, Thurkettle strongly believed the airmen had mistaken the Orfordness Lighthouse for a UFO.
You and I only had one site.
Yeah.
As far as we were concerned,
Well,
because
that's it. I'd only ever heard about
yesterday.
one site.
I made an assumption. They took me out. I say they, the police took me out and says, this is it.
You know, this is new, this is different. I have no opinion on this. I wasn't here 20 years ago. No one talked about this 20 years ago. The other site is the site of folklore. That's the one that's famous. That's the one that everyone's been visiting.
You've just ruined some things.
This site is just a whole new ball game. This site is so far, and with the intervening trees and rises and falls in the ground, you could never have seen the farmhouse or the lighthouse from this site.
So talk to me, what was the significance of there being two sites?
Well, my site, there was no way you could see the lighthouse anyway from there. It wasn't visible from the location we were at.
Not at all?
Not at all.
So that removes that as a possible explanation?
Yes, it does.
Completely.
With each new piece of evidence, the Rendlesham puzzle becomes a bit more complete. During the course of Jim Penniston's 1994 regression, he recalled being interrogated by two mysterious men. He would have to wait 8 long years to discover their identity.
Who are the two other guys?
They're agents too. DS8, C8, something, I can't hear everything.
Part of this hypnosis on that tape is that I was debriefed by DS8, which made no sense at the time to me. When the MOD files came out, they mentioned DS8. I didn't even know it was a real agency.
DS8 stands for Defense Secretariat 8. That was essentially the civilian division within the Air Force side of the Ministry of Defense that had the lead on UFO investigations.
Could these agents have been the infamous Men in Black?
The Men in Black are for real. I'm convinced from my studies that the Air Force Office of Special Investigations sends out counterintelligence investigators to deal with UFO witnesses. And I know many of people who've had quite alarming experiences with them.
Perhaps one reason for the intense interrogations in the Rendlesham case was the stockpile of nuclear weapons stored on the base.
I think there does seem to be no doubt that over military installations, research installations, establishments connected with particularly atomic weapons, there do seem to be a disproportionate number of sightings.
For many UFO researchers, the best example of the UFO nuclear connection is found on the Halt tape. Recorded on December 28, 1980, the tape provides a detailed account of the UFO's interest in the base's weapons storage area.
Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is
moved toward us at very high speed, came almost directly overhead, hovered, and sent down a direct beam, something like laser beams. I was thinking at the time, is this a warning? Is this a signal? Is this an attempt to communicate? And just as suddenly as it came on, it clicked, it was gone.
Did they take any particular interest in the place where weapons would have been stored if weapons had been on the base?
At least one of the beams of light came down in an area that I would say would be a high interest.
One object still hovering over Woodbridge Base at about 5 to 10 degrees off the horizon, still moving erratic and similar lights and beaming down this area.
The object to the south was actually sending some beams down near or into the weapons storage area. That caused me a great deal of concern. You know, what was it doing there? Was it searching for something? Was it trying to... Who knows what it was trying to do?
General Gordon Williams, who was then the wing commander of Bentwaters Woodbridge, remembers hearing Halt's tape, but he doesn't recall any reports of a craft over the weapons storage area.
I don't recall him ever saying anything about that, and certainly I would have known and recognized the significance of that. We're not talking about now things being off base in the dark, talking about on base, a place that's lit up and that sort of thing. So it doesn't make sense to me that that would have occurred.
In the immediate aftermath of this, there was an unscheduled arrival of a large transport plane, either a C-130 or a C-141, that came in and had a special team that inspected the nuclear weapons of the base because evidently this object had shined a beam on the weapons, and it was speculated that they might have damaged the nuclear weaponry in some way. Now, lest that sound really incredible to someone, they might want to recall that nuclear weapons in America at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967 were tampered with by a UFO that disabled more than 10 nuclear missiles.
The preponderance of evidence in the Rendlesham case is undeniable. Official documents, an audio tape,
Probably about 200 to 300 yards away. It looks like an eye winking at you.
radar reports, and radiation readings.
These radiation readings were higher than normal, actually by a factor of about 10.
Even corroborating eyewitness testimony of numerous U.S. airmen and British civilians. There is also a belief, shared by many involved, that the U.S. and British governments tampered with evidence, threatened witnesses, and employed mind control techniques, all in an effort to conceal the entire affair.
Let's just say that I am familiar enough with workings of some government agencies that I did not trust them as far as I can throw this building.
Moving beyond the claims of brainwashing, cover-ups, and conspiracies, the biggest question involving the Rendlesham Forest incident remains unanswered. Exactly what was it that U.S. airmen encountered in December of 1980? The answer may well lie in secret government files, but perhaps it's contained in the repressed memories of eyewitnesses like Sergeant Jim Peniston.
Did you at any time have a sense that this craft came from another planet?
No.
For instance, did it come from Mars?
No.
So it originated.
Us.
It's us.
I don't believe in extraterrestrials. Never have. Probably never will. The only explanation that I can come up with, or a guess of it, this is nothing more than us experiencing some type of time travel or something like that. It sounds pretty bizarre. What else could it be?
If they are time travelers from our future, as some have suggested, that's encouraging news for our planet.
Whether these UFOs are indeed visitors from our future or from another planet, why does the government remain silent on the issue?
There is a very strong body of opinion which believes that the United States in particular is in communication with the occupants of these so-called flying objects. That a good deal of exchange of technology has taken place, that the United States has made significant advances in various technologies thanks to information given to them by the aliens.
Here you have technology that is so much more powerful than ours. If we could learn how to have the same technology Isn't that a wonderful power in this world? Isn't that what maybe some of the stealth is about?
Some of that technology is in use today, perhaps to do with advanced forms of weaponry and propulsion. In my view, it's absolutely justified that this information should continue to being withheld at an above top secret level.
Though the government continues its vehement denials, those who've witnessed these events refuse to keep quiet about the UFO question.
Don't you think we have a responsibility to tell what we saw? Don't you think so? Believe it or not, let you believe or let somebody else believe or not believe. You draw your own conclusions.
Brian, that investigation's not over. It never stopped. He retired in 91, 93. But I'll tell you what, the citizens of the United States are getting a bang for their buck here, because we're still trying to figure out what the hell we see out there.
A reminder that the all-new series of Stargate SG-1 continues tomorrow night at 8, with a chance to sink your teeth into last season's finale of Angel at 9. Next tonight, though, buckle up for Road Wars.